Today's morning devotion with you. So, we are still walking through the book of Luke. We are in chapter 24. We are approaching the end of the book. And the last couple of days, we've seen accounts of Jesus' resurrection. He met a couple of disciples on the road to Emmaus. They didn't know who he was. And he walked with them, spent some time with them, ended up staying with them and breaking bread. And then they finally realized who he was and what was happening. And at this point in time, he vanished. And these unknown, unnamed disciples proceeded to go to Jerusalem to tell the rest of the disciples. Now, what's really cool about this is it coincides with another account that Mary Magdalene had seen the risen Savior and the risen Lord and proceeded to tell the disciples as well. So you've got this culmination of different people in different areas with a similar thing. They have seen Jesus raised from the dead. So now, with that in mind, let's read the verses today. We're going to be reading chapter 24, verses 36 through 43. And it says, Now as they said these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, Peace to you. But they were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he said to them, Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. When he said this to them, he showed them his hands and his feet. But while they still did not believe for joy, and marveled, he said to them, Have you any food here? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and ate in their presence. Man, put yourself in the disciples' shoes here. You abandoned Jesus at his most dire moment in ministry. You had spent 3.5 years walking with him, sleeping in the same area, doing life with him, learning from him, shadowing from him, only to have him die the most brutal death imaginable. And all your hopes, all your faith had been rocked in a moment. And out of nowhere, you start hearing murmurings from Mary Magdalene that the Lord has risen. Then these unnamed disciples that the Lord has risen. There's a saying that sometimes it's too good to be true. Well, thank goodness this is too good, and it is true. But imagine them in this moment where out of nowhere, in the midst of them, Jesus comes and says, Peace to you. How would you respond? Still had the holes in his hands, holes in his feet. You'd watched him die. How would you respond? It's tough. It is a real test of our faith. And we see in John later on, Thomas is still doubting, and Jesus tells him to put his hands in his hands and in his side so he can see. But Jesus came to his disciples. He tried to bring them peace. And I'm not sure if he was being sarcastic here. I'm not sure if he was slightly disappointed. I'm not sure what his mindset here was. But when he says, Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your heart? And then later on here, he breaks up the seriousness and says, Have you any food here? So I can't help but imagine that's a bit lighthearted. He's trying to break the tension in the room and just show them like, guys, this is me. Let's spend some time. Breaking bread was such a very dire and vital thing back then. And that's what he was doing here. So, how would you respond? What would you do in that situation when you saw the risen Savior? It's tough. I can't help but think that I might have some doubt in myself. But thank goodness Jesus meets us where we're at. Thank goodness his resurrection is so good. and it's true. So let us rest in that today, guys. Let us rest in the fact that Jesus is Lord, He is Savior,